The Rose Foundation is domestic violence prevention organization, and it's a charitable trust. It's a non-profit. And the reason why I set up this foundation is because domestic violence is part of gender-based violence, and it is the most rampant form of violence, especially when you look at intimate partner violence. And intimate partner violence has also been called spousal violence. And because I know this is such a problem, it's an epidemic in Kenya, it's so rampant in our society. That's why I set up the society, because I have a passion to see domestic violence end, because I believe domestic violence is preventable.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shujaa, where we celebrate our unsung heroes, people like you and I who are doing extraordinary things to uplift themselves and the individuals and community around them. I am joined by Esther Kisahu, founder and director at the Rose Foundation, an organization that deals with gender-based violence. And welcome to the show. Welcome to Shujaa, Esther.
Thank you so much.
I think we can start off with the definition of gender-based violence, because we've had a lot of there's a conundrum there on exactly what gender-based violence is.
Well, let me begin by a definition of gender-based violence. Then I'll narrow it to domestic violence and intimate partner violence, because the Rose Foundation is specifically dealing with domestic violence. Well, gender-based violence is any violence that is perpetrated towards another human being based on gender. And domestic violence is violence, aggressive behavior, whether physically, sexually, emotionally, verbally, that results in harm or imminent harm of another person, where one person is using coercive power to violate another, to exploit another, to dominate another, which exclusively, mostly happens in our homes. And sometimes it is referred to as spousal abuse, because intimate partner violence or partner violence is the most rampant form of domestic violence, and that is in our homes.
All right. Now, for intimate partner violence, I think we can contextualize the discussion on what happens every day. Now, does it have to necessarily be your husband who, or your wife who gets violent with you, or exactly what tenets does that limit it to?
Well, intimate partner violence is about relationships. That is why it is good to understand when we talk about domestic violence, we're actually talking about relationships, not just violence that happens in the home, although it exclusively happens in the home. Actually, we're talking about relationships, because violence between partners can also happen out there in the parking lot in public, but it's still relationship violence. However, when we're talking about spousal abuse or partner abuse, we recognize that most of it is going to happen in our homes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Now, as your organization, maybe you can share with us how exactly you approach this issue of intimate partner violence in terms of domestic violence.
Well, the way we have approached it, because we realize that for a long time, intimate partner violence has only been called spousal abuse, because it was directly referring to husband-wife relationship. We realize that long-term relationships where there's cohabitation, we call them sometimes come we stay, or in a short-term relationship, boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, that violence, relationship violence also occurs. So we need to expand our definition to intimate partner violence other than spousal, so that we can reach out all those people in those categories who are going through violence. And another thing maybe to quickly point out, when we talk about domestic violence other than intimate partner violence, we're recognizing that there can be violence between a parent-child, or there can be violence between siblings, or sometimes even employer and domestic worker violence. That is domestic violence. But we are talking about intimate partner violence because it's the most rampant form of violence in domestic violence.
Amazing. So you have been able to expand this focus to include all those other instances.
Yes, we have.
And what tools as an organization have you employed in terms, do you raise awareness represent some of the people who've gone through, domestic violence in court. Exactly how do you go about everything?
Well, the Rose Foundation is a prevention organization, and prevention is actually a public health approach. And because I have a public health background, in my public health studies, during those studies, I was studying in the US, I found out that domestic violence is preventable because it is a public health problem. And because it's a public health problem, the Rose Foundation has taken that approach, that public health primary approach, to do prevention. That means prevention work begins with awareness, and awareness then is put together, is combined with other programs that now make it more powerful in dealing with the problem, again stopping domestic violence before it happens, and thus we reduce the number of victims and we reduce the numbers of perpetrators of violence.
Amazing, great cycle and process there to follow through. And maybe to ask you, why GBV? I mean, so many other areas in the community that you can choose to concentrate on and rectify particular issues. So why did you head in that direction?
Well, the reason is that as an individual, I have realized that it is rampant in our society. 1 out of 3 women are going to experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime, and 1 out of 7 men are going to experience the same. So we really have an epidemic in our hands when we look at the history of gender-based violence, and specifically again targeting the work of the Rose Foundation, which is domestic violence. There have been many deaths, lives lost. We hear in the media, we hear news, we watch television, we read in the print media, domestic violence cases. They are on the rise. They are more rampant than any other form of violence combined, whether it is genocide violence against women, whether it is sexual assault against women. When we come back to our homes, that's where the violence is. So that became my passion, not because I could see the numbers and the destruction that domestic violence was bringing, because it's also an experience to me. I'm a survivor of domestic violence.
Amazing. So that's how you got inspired into getting into domestic violence. And I don't know, Esther, if you mind sharing a little bit about your experience, for anybody watching out there, and they may pick up a piece of inspiration.
Yes, I was married for 9 years, and in that marriage 9 years, there was violence all throughout. My life was almost taken by my husband at that time. He almost stabbed me, and his sister intervened and saved me. And I realized that because I'd come through that near-death experience, apart from not being stabbed, I was dragged across the bed, I was injured, I was bleeding. So that experience drove me to want now to get out permanently, but more so I wanted to be safe, because I want to reach out to victims and tell them safety is an issue when you want to get out of a violent situation. Only get out when it is safely to do so, because there's a possibility of homicide happening, murder happening. At that point, you are living 2 days after, 2 months after, or 2 years after. It is the most dangerous time to leave a violent situation.
And one tool of awareness that you have employed and your organization is the Defeat Domestic Violence Walk, and that was amazing. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind the walk from Mombasa to Nairobi and how you brought everything together.
Defeat Domestic Violence Awareness Walk from Mombasa to Nairobi. I say we because remember I'm the founder, but I have a board and trustees. I knew with that enduring, excruciating walk, they were taking each painful step they were taking, they're representing the victim who is going through a violence. And by having this longevity of the walk, it was going to stay more in people's minds and create that lasting impact, very powerful impact of domestic violence.
And what's the feedback that you got from that walk?
During the walk, we got media covering us in format of radios as we were walking along, and then as we finished the walk, we had Nation cover us the Daily Nation covered the work and the Rose Foundation in print media. That creation of that awareness at that time really met our goal and our objective of creating awareness. But more so, again, the reason why it is a walk, it is history. Ian and TJ have made history. It is a historical event, and because it is a historical event, people will go back and say, Ian and TJ walked 1 year after this, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. They'll walk. Why did they walk? And they will say they walked because they were passionate against domestic violence and gender-based violence. They wanted to do something so dramatic and so difficult and so painful so that they could say no to domestic violence. And that is the reason why we did the walk.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Esther, for joining us.
It was a joy to be with
you.
you.
We appreciate learning more about GBV and most importantly domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And we wish you all the best with the organization.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Shujaa. Keep it WTV Kenya.
My passion about domestic violence is that everybody just deserves, dignity to live life like they want to and they deserve to. I worked for the Defeat Domestic Violence because I felt that for my sisters, okay, I have a sister, for my mom, for my nieces, my cousins, my friends, I should stand up and be a voice for them and, just show show people that in whatever situation we all stand together.
I did the Defeat the Domestic Violence walk in February because I believe that all humans have the right to be free and to be open and social with everyone. And for me, violence generally is wrong for anyone, whether it's male-to-male violence, female-to-female violence. And most importantly, I did the walk because of my sisters. I have 2 younger sisters. And the last thing I would want is for them to be in a situation where they are being abused and cannot stand up for themselves. And I believe to be able to give them that opportunity, not even to be in that situation, is to stop domestic violence in its tracks before it gets to them, so to speak.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Shujaa. Today we are highlighting individuals who have been doing a worthy thing in terms of raising awareness on domestic violence. Now I am joined by Rajula and Ian Lai, who are going to take us through their experience in participating in the Defeat Domestic Violence Walk all the way from Mombasa to Nairobi. I mean, it sounds absolutely insane. And I think maybe the first question off the top of my mind is, how was it literally walking from Mombasa to Nairobi?
It was, I can't put like a single word to it because it was crazy. Because the good times, very painful moments.
Oh yeah.
A lot of painful moments, hungry moments. But it was an experience. It was kind of a roller coaster, I think, if I was to put it in those words. It was a roller coaster of emotions and getting to push ourselves to certain limits that we did not know that our bodies can withstand or hold.
Yeah. What about you, Julia?
For me, it was like you said, it's a whole lot of things you go through during the walk, and I know when you do it, you like every day is a struggle because first of all you don't want to wake up. You hate mornings because it's the same thing. I was just thinking about it today. I think even to some extent you get traumatized because the car honks and the trucks and all that, you're like, I'm not gonna face this again, and you just don't want to go. But once you get in there, you just do what you can.
Amazing.
Next stop.
Amazing. For each one of you, what was your driving force every morning? I mean, you're talking about it being hard to wake up in the morning. For you to get that energy and strength to get up and sometimes even cover like 30 plus kilometers on a single day, what was your inspiration, your one mantra that kept you going?
For me, it was just to see my sisters. So I'd wake up in the morning and just go like, if we finish this, I know I'm this number of kilometers closer to seeing my 2 baby sisters. And so whenever we'd talk at night and I tell them what has happened, and be like, we're on the left, we just go on. Like, tomorrow morning we wake up, I'll see you sooner and sooner and sooner.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, your driving force. What about you, Thomas?
For me, it was different because I'd already seen my folks in Mombasa when we went there. So I guess my mom was just my factor, because even when I had like low moments, she's the one person I used to talk to a lot. So yeah, my driving force, my strength would be my mom.
Why the walk, I think, is another question. Various other forms of raising awareness, but you chose, and worthily so, to walk from Mombasa to Nairobi to raise awareness about domestic violence. Why the walk?
I don't think it wasn't so much as our choosing, rather than what the foundation thought would make the biggest statement.
Impact.
Yeah, and the biggest impact on people. So we would just hold on to volunteer to walk, and I don't know, I guess I felt I could do it. I thought I had the strength for it, and that's why I did it. I mean, there's this song, freely you've been given, fully give. So I got for free, so I just had to give back to something.
Good, great.
I think for me it's pretty much the same thing, but also as that was my line of thought when we started. But as we went along and went ahead, still, you see, the issue of domestic violence is still there.
Oh yeah.
It's still really rampant in society. And as we walked, we'd still get cases of domestic violence cases. A lady had been killed by the husband, and the husband is nowhere to be seen.
Oh my.
And what I realized, and we shared this with Thomas during the walk, was, in the sense, as I mentioned earlier, the walk was kind of a roller coaster. And we kind of felt that, to some extent also, it's the same way a person who's in an abusive relationship. Because you find that there's this time where everything is all rosy and good, and then in a second things go left.
Yeah.
And there's all this animosity and brutality, and then all of a sudden you're back to rosy, and so for me personally, I felt like more than anything, it kind of showed that there are people willing, that this is what people actually go through, as opposed to maybe standing on a platform and saying this is wrong and this actually going in and challenging your body to extremes, even though extremes that not necessarily domestic violence victims face, but are around almost similar in the sense that where you push your body and your minds.
Oh yeah, the motions and everything.
Exactly, yes.
Amazing. And maybe to ask, why domestic violence? I mean, for you, what's your personal inclination to raising awareness about domestic violence?
Well, for me personally, to say the truth, I have always been I've always wanted to support, number one, people before causes, and people in the sense that I'm really passionate about anything that I do and anything that I stick my hands in. And when I first met Esther and she told me about the war, I read a lot of passion in what she wanted to do. And for me, I felt I have this belief that we are put on this world not for ourselves, but to help somebody else. Your help will come along the way, but for you, it's your job to help somebody else as soon as you can. So when Esther told me about the walk, and more so when she said it's about domestic violence, and I think it was coming in the wake of a certain lady who had just been beaten senseless in Langata.
Oh yeah.
I felt it's the right thing to do, and it's the right place to be, and it's for the right cause. And again, as I said, since I read a lot of passion in what she was about and what she believed in, I felt I really couldn't pass up this opportunity to really support somebody who is really passionate about what they are doing. In fact, unlike Thomas, I volunteered to go in for the walk. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. And as we wind up, maybe one very short piece of advice to anybody out there. You can look into the camera, who's undergoing some sort of domestic violence, on how to get help and to move from that destructive situation.
Nobody should tell you like you're worthless. Everybody's life is worth living. The choices you make are your own. Sometimes you make the wrong choices, but it's never too late to turn from it. There's always help, and there's always people who care for you. So if you feel you're in a situation where you're helpless and you have nobody to turn to, there's always somebody who will be there to listen to you. Be it a best friend, be it an aunt, be it a cousin, whoever. It could even be a stranger. Just listen to the voice, that one voice that tells you like you can do better.
You have a right to live, and nobody has the right to dictate how you're going to live. And so the easiest words I could say is get out, and I know that's easier said than done. But again, as he said, there's always somebody willing to listen. If person A won't listen, go to person B. If person B won't listen, go to person C. Just keep looking for somebody who is willing to listen, and also try and find ways to detach yourself from that situation.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Thomas and Ian, for joining us and for sharing that wonderful, wonderful experience here on Shujaa. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here. If you need any help getting away from that destructive situation, there are very many people who would love to help, and you can also keep it interactive. We can connect you to the Rose Foundation. Just let us know on SMS 20058, Facebook WTVKE, or Twitter WTVKA. Now, I've been your host, Linda Kroeger. This has been Shujaa, where we highlight wonderful Kenyans like you and I, ordinary people doing exceedingly and above all that they're capable of to inspire those around them and change their communities and Kenya for a better tomorrow. Keep it WTV Kenya.